This is today's members' business debate on motion number 6389, the name of Duncan-McNeil on Ash Scotland's 40th anniversary. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and would those members who wish to speak in the debate please press the request to speak buttons as soon as possible. I now call on Duncan-McNeil to open the debate. 7 minutes, please, Mr McNeil.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officers. It has indeed been a long day, and I thank all those members who have been able to stay behind, and of course all those who signed the motion. In 1973, the Scottish Committee of Action on Smoking and Health, as it was originally known, was established by the Royal College of Physicians in Edinburgh, operating from a small back room in the RCPE buildings with just 2 part-time staff. Its medical director, Dr Aileen Crofton, wife of Sir John Crofton, and Alison Hillhouse, who secretary, who would later go on to become Ash Scotland Chief Executive in 1984. The world as we know it was much different then. Smoking was the accepted norm in both public and private here in Scotland, and you were just as likely to see somebody smoking in a hospital as you see people now, thankfully, taking action of those standing at the hospital entrance. Ash Scotland campaigned to limit the tobacco industry influence, advertising and sponsorship, and for increased tobacco taxation, and to campaign for smoke-free places, and of course to provide advice to smokers who wanted to quit. Ash Scotland worked very hard to communicate the evidence of smoking on policymakers, and indeed I think many will remember some of this publicity. In 1982, which was a very successful publication in its day, where they published the facts constituency by constituency, which is almost a norm now, but to influence those politicians, which made it that issue, that Scottish epidemic, more vivid for those parliamentarians. By the late 1990s and entering the new millennium, Ash Scotland had grown from 2 people to nearly 20 and offered specialist tobacco information to the public, smoking cessation as it's now better known, and training services and development, delivered projects to reduce health inequalities resulting from tobacco. Throughout 2000, we saw a raft of strong controls on tobacco from both Holyrood, Westminster and Scotland, leading the UK by introducing a smoke-free public places in 2006. Which became, and we also had a complete UK-wide ban on tobacco advertising, sponsorship, and a rise in the minimum age of sale from 16 to 18. The implementation of graphic warnings on each pack and the expansion of free NHS stop smoking support throughout Scotland. 40 years of action on smoking and health is a proud boast of Ash Scotland, and while they would not claim to have done all of that themselves, they have worked with other organisations we know, with government and indeed the Heart Foundation. They have certainly achieved a proud legacy, highlighting the hazards and risks of smoking, not only in individuals and specific groups, children, young people. Since Ash Scotland was formulated over 4 decades ago, we have seen adult smoking in Scotland half, from 50% of the population in the early 70s to less than 25% today. This means around 1 million less adults in Scotland are now not smoking, if that hadn't been the case. If anyone was unaware, and I think we can't discuss this story without discussing the impact that the Ash had in the Parliament, if anyone was unaware of the campaigning zeal of Ash Scotland, then if you were in and around this Parliament leading up to, during and passing the legislation of the ban in public places, then they couldn't be ignored. Their impact was significant in this Parliament, pushing us, encouraging us, to take those decisions, which some people, it needs to be conceded, described as a ban too far, and others the single biggest public health measure that we could take to improve the health of the people of Scotland. And that's when I and many others came across the organisation up close. As a member of the Health Committee at that time, scrutinising the bill, I freely confess that I was a sceptic to what the ban could achieve and what was possible. Not about the harm of smoking, but whether we could achieve that. And I asked many tough questions of the organisations and others throughout that process. Being on the committee, of course, was a tough gig, and at the time, Rosanna Cunningham, where the convener, was uncompromising. She dragged us off to Dublin on a fact-finding mission. Bar after bar, I tell you. In the temple bar after bar, long into the night, long hours were given to examine the impact on the smoking ban in Ireland. And after the visit, I freely accept that far from being a sceptic, I became optimistic about what could be achieved, converted, if you like, on the road back from Dublin. But my efforts to get on programme were not always welcome. My amendment to the Smoking and Health and Social Care Scotland Bill to change the minimum legal age for buying tobacco in Scotland to 18 did not get off to the best start. They were indeed sceptical about whether that would be a good measure. But I was pleased to be able to convert ash on this occasion, and I now see that they mention and list the increase in the age of purchasing tobacco as one of the significant milestones. And I'll conclude on this. While this is a night to congratulate that organisation for the work and achievements that have been made, we need to, and I think we do agree, that much more needs to be done. And there are issues in and around young adolescents and inequalities that must be addressed, and we agree on that point. Thank you for your indulgence, Deputy Presiding Officer.
Many thanks. Members will be aware that standing orders dictate that we have to be finished by 7 o'clock tonight. Would those members who wish to speak therefore confine themselves to no more than their time, indeed less would be more and would be appreciated by us. Now Collins, Stewart Stevenson to be followed by Jackson Carlaw. Less than up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And let me start by congratulating Duncan-McNeil on giving me another opportunity to be quite less than moderate on a subject which I feel passionately about. And let me also once again register my absolute admiration for the political courage of a Labour First Minister, Jack McConnell, when he put his personal credibility on the line to make this happen, building on work that my colleague Stuart Maxwell had done. So I think these were brave acts which should be congratulated. I really don't have time, do forgive me. I'm not a moderate, I said in my opening remarks, and indeed when others suggest that tobacco companies are murderers, I find myself unable to summon any counter-argument. Every 30 minutes, a Scot will die as a consequence of tobacco. So during the course of this short debate, someone will die because tobacco companies choose that that is the case. So Ash have done a great deal in the 40 years since they were founded to raise this issue in public consciousness and in legislative fora. I was a fresh-faced 26-year-old when they were founded. I don't see that person in the mirror today, and I see a very different Scotland in the mirror today. But this, of course, is not a new issue. Let me give you some quotes. Smoking is dangerous to the lungs. It's hurtful and dangerous to youth. It's very pernicious to the heart. And these quotations, respectively, were published in 1604, 1606, and 1637 by James VI. That, in my family, takes me 10 generations back to my 8 times great-grandfather, Andrew Berry. James VI wrote in a counterblast to tobacco, and he wrote in particular, "This filthy smoke makes a kitchen oft-times in the inward parts of men, soiling and infecting them with an unctuous and oily kind of soot, as hath been found that after their death were open." Because he attended post-mortems and saw 400 years ago the effects of tobacco, which we still grapple with in these days. One of the first acts of James VI, of course, in 1603, when he became the King of the United Kingdom, was to raise the taxation on a pound of tobacco from twopence to £6 10 shillings. So this guy got it right every way. In today's terms, by the way, that would be £40,000 on a pound of tobacco. So that's absolutely something which shows that we've understood this problem for so long, and yet we still allowed these pernicious companies to kill people in our society. We've actually lost in the 20th century in the UK more people to the consequences of smoking than in all the wars in which we've been involved. Now, I include civilian and military casualties. More people have been killed by smoking. So, Presiding Officer, when we talk about this subject and ash's role in this, we talk in something very important. I close by just saying that Ireland is a good model in one way, but they've still got ashtrays in the bar behind the Dáil. There's a special informal exception for members of the Dáil. Thank goodness we don't follow them on that road. Presiding Officer.
Thanks very much. Now Colin Jackson-Carlaw to be followed by Jackie Bailey, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I suppose in what constitutes an all-night sitting for this Parliament that it's appropriate at the fag end of the day we should be discussing ash. And I do thank Duncan McNeil for bringing forward the motion, and I note that ash has endured for 40 years. I'm afraid I'm not going to be very nice after that because I have a number of reservations. Let me first of all declare a vested interest. I'm a lifelong non-smoker. I abhor smoke. I grew up as a child going through, coming home on the school bus. When you had the bench seats upstairs, you could have cut with a knife and fork the atmosphere on the top of that bus. I think I agree with everything Stuart Stevenson has said about smoking and the effect on public health and the loss of life that it has had over so many years. And I also am prepared to attribute to ash some of the credit for many of the initiatives which Duncan McNeil listed. But many of those initiatives were progressed by committed politicians on all sides of the political divide out of conviction, and not just because there was an external agency lobbying for it. My reservation, however, though, is of the funding of ash. Of the £1.2 million that they raised last year, only £23,000 came from donations from the public as a charity. £569,000 came from the government. Within the voluntary income section of £307,000, a further £250,000 came from the government. £33,000 came from NHS Scotland. But I suppose concerning to me is that donations were received from the British Heart Foundation and Cancer Research UK. And I say that because I don't know that when people are giving money to cancer research or are giving money to the British Heart Foundation in voluntary appeals as they do, that they realise the money they are giving is then being directly transferred by way of a grant to a campaigning organisation like ASH. Now, it wouldn't change my donation because I donate personally a considerable amount of money to cancer research each year. But I do it because I think cancer research is researching into a cure for cancer. And I think that there needs to be more transparency in terms of where funding comes and where it goes. And I look at where the money was spent. Of the £1.2 million, £910,000 was spent on salaries. Very little was spent in campaigning. Indeed, on publications on the website, expenditure actually fell in the last year. And in addition to that, expenditure increased on fees to consultancies and on travel to attend various conferences. I want to see direct action to assist people to reduce smoking. I want to see smoking levels reduced. I want to see people who want to give up smoking given every encouragement to do that. I want to see every effort made to reduce smoking amongst young people. But I'm also pragmatic in as much as I don't want to hitch myself to every bandwagon that's going. And I note too that Ash say they only support things that are fundamentally evidence-based. Well, in which case I would prefer to see the empirical evidence from Australia on plain packaging before I assert that that in itself will make a difference. If it does, I will be very happy to support it. If it doesn't, then it's a campaign towards a false promise. If it doesn't make a contribution, then a legislative solution to promote something that ultimately is proven not to work is not a sensible use of our time. Similarly, I note that they say we should be supporting the private members' bill on the making illegal of smoking in cars where children are present. I have huge concerns about the enforceability of that. Are children to be called to give evidence against their parents as the only witnesses? I don't know. For all of that, at the age of 40, I think people should stand on their own 2 feet, not the public subsidy. And so I'd like Ash to cease its public funding and to make its own way in the world by encouraging the public to give it the money it needs.
Thank you very much. I now call on Jackie Bailey, after which we'll move to the Minister.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I welcome the opportunity to participate in this debate and join with others in congratulating Duncan-McNeil for securing the time this evening, albeit at the end of a long day. It is customary, in members' debates where we tend to all agree with each other. I have to say, I find it extremely difficult to agree with anything probably that Jackson Carlaw said, but I will leave it at that, because we are here to celebrate Ash Scotland's 40th anniversary, and you can be in no doubt that's been 40 years of very effective and successful campaigning to ensure that there is action on smoking. Ash Scotland have been key in changing public opinion, in challenging government at all levels to be brave, and to lead the way in tackling the consequences of smoking. And we all know the link between tobacco and ill health, and the link with cancer is abundantly clear. There are increased risks of a variety of different conditions, which I won't name in deference to the presiding officer and being swift with my speech. But there really is nothing good to be said about smoking. Equally, there is nothing quite like a convert. And having given up smoking something like a decade ago, I have never looked back, and I would encourage others to do the same. It is right, though, Presiding Officer, to record the progress that has been made in both parliaments. The ban on tobacco advertising, first from radio, then from TV, the health warnings appearing on cigarette packets, the legislation to ban smoking in public spaces, a historic moment for this Parliament that has made a huge difference. Can I, though, put on the record that George Fawkes was indeed the very first person, way back in 1983, to bring forward a members' bill, not in this place, but in another, and he's been a patient person waiting for this moment. And of course, the age at which you can purchase tobacco, raised from 16 to 18, was very much something that Duncan-McNeil successfully brought forward and pushed through the Parliament committee system. And then, of course, came the ban on unstaffed vending machines and changes to tobacco displays. So adult smoking rates, as we've heard from Duncan, when Ash Scotland was set up, were 50%. The latest Scottish Household Survey for 2011 shows it's down to 23%. I also welcome the Scottish Government's most recent strategy on achieving a smoke-free Scotland. We agree with the aspiration, but we recognise it will be a challenge to deliver, and I hope that the Minister will outline some of the action they intend to take, but particularly so, Presiding Officer, in deprived areas, because the prevalence rate of smoking in disadvantaged areas is 40%. Compare that to adults in the least deprived areas, which stands at 11%. And we realise there is a huge job still to be done. The gap is just too big, and it's a major contributor to health inequality and reduced mortality rates. So I plead with the Minister that if he's going to bring forward an area in which we focus on, let it be this. Presiding Officer, most people that I know experience a road to Damascus moment. In Duncan-McNeil's case, it was the road back from Dublin. So can I congratulate Ash on ensuring that we were all brave and we travelled that road back from Dublin with Duncan-McNeil, but that we continue to be brave in the future. Thank you.
Very much. Minister, 6 minutes and 15 seconds until 7 o'clock, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I, like others, congratulate Duncan-McNeil on securing time for this important debate, and also in reflecting on the work of Ash Scotland, who I must confess, when they were established in Scotland, I hadn't even started primary school. So, but they have obviously over a number of years now, 40 years to be exact, made a lot of progress in helping to support changes in how we perceive smoking and tobacco within our society overall. And if anything, probably more than just the simple legislative changes, it's been the cultural shift that has been created as a result of some of these changes that I think is most significant. So I, like others, want to pay tribute to Ash Scotland for the significant contribution they've made to Scotland's tobacco control strategy and agenda over recent years. All of those who have been associated with Ash Scotland over the years, I reckon, can be very proud of the part that they've played in taking forward that success, particularly in more recent years. Now, as Duncan-McNeil made reference to, he was involved in scrutinising the bill to introduce the ban on smoking in public places. And again, Scotland led the way in the UK in that particular area of policy, and Dublin was in Ireland, were one of the first countries in the world to introduce such a ban. However, there was significant work done in this Parliament before we got to the point of legislation. Kenny Gibson looked at bringing forward a members' bill to ban smoking in restaurants. And also Stuart Maxwell looked at bringing forward a private members' bill before the then Scottish Executive decided to bring forward their own legislation on banning smoking in public places. So from a very early stage in this Parliament, there was clearly an intention amongst its members to look at how we can address smoking within our society and to take forward progressive measures that would assist us in doing that. And we've made significant progress since the ban was introduced in 2006. Alongside that, as Jackie Baillie mentioned, we've also had the comprehensive legislation which has banned tobacco advertising and promotion, which has been implemented across the UK. The minimum age of sales has been raised as well, that Duncan-McNeil made reference to. We've also saw large graphic warnings being implemented on packs as a result of policy changes as well, and smoking cessation services were established and have become increasingly accessible across the country. Now, I'm also pleased that following the legal challenges, unsuccessful legal challenges mounted by the tobacco companies against the legislation to ban the display of tobacco in shops, that we've now saw larger shops introduce the display ban, and by April 2015 we'll also have the ban of tobacco displays implemented in our smaller retailers. And Jackie Baillie made reference to our new tobacco control strategy, creating a tobacco-free generation, which I launched at the end of March this year. And again, I want to take this opportunity to thank Ash for the role they've played in supporting the development of the strategy. Scotland is now one of the first countries in the world to have introduced an ambitious target, 2034, for reducing smoking prevalence to 5% of our population. That means a child born this year, celebrating their 21st birthday, will be celebrating their 21st birthday in 2034. Our aim is to create a generation of young adults and young people who don't smoke, creating a Scotland where young adults and young people turn away from tobacco use, and that we get the health, social and economic benefits that come from that approach. Now, as a government, we recognise that this is a very ambitious approach to take in terms of tobacco control, but we believe that we need to take bold and decisive action in order to reduce smoking prevalence in Scotland further if we are to create a tobacco-free generation. And the 5% figure is certainly a challenging one. And to achieve it, it will require determined effort on the part of government, but it will also require determined effort on the part of other agencies who have a role to play in helping to reduce smoking prevalence. It's a target which we believe can help to make sure that we change the whole culture of smoking in Scotland fundamentally, and to get the health benefits that will come from that. However, there are a whole range of measures within the strategy, which is over a 5-year period, that we will take forward in order to make sure that we start to take that action, such as a national campaign which will start early next year to raise awareness of the dangers associated with smoking in enclosed spaces, the introduction of a new target to achieve a substantial reduction in children's exposure to second-hand smoke by 2020, continuing to support parents to create smoke-free homes for children, that all our NHS boards should have smoke-free grounds by 2015. And we're also going to review our smoking cessation services with a view to making sure they are much more effective, and in particular more effective in tackling smoking in our more deprived communities in Scotland in order to close down that gap. It's a strategy which over the next 5 years I believe can help to deliver real change, not only to help to make sure that we make progress in this agenda, but to demonstrate yet again that Scotland is prepared to lead the world in taking forward the necessary bold measures that will allow us to make sure that we do achieve our target of becoming a smoke-free nation by 2034. And I've got no doubt that Ash Scotland will continue to play their role in making sure that we deliver on that commitment.
Many thanks. And I now conclude and close this meeting of Parliament. Thank you all very much.